1 second. I can't deal with this small frame. It's too much. There we go. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another live episode of The Breakdown. I'm your host, Nate Pike. Today is Checks His Watch, June 21st, 2026. This episode is going so far into the weeds. Make sure you're wearing long pants and put your socks over top of your long pants, because we're going so far into the weeds, there could be ticks. I'm just saying. That's how far into the weeds this episode is going to go, because we have so much to talk about on so many different things. So we're going to just jump right in and get started. Before we do, though, we're going to jump right in, and then Nate's going to say, wait a second, because we're a very professional operation. Stick around to the end, because we're announcing the next, I'm so excited, the next guest. There are three guests remaining to be announced. Hard to do that with a pen. 3 guests remaining to be announced for our live show in Edmonton on July 25th. And I'm so excited for all of them. But we're announcing another one tonight, and I think this one is going to take a few folks by maybe a little bit of surprise. So do with that what you will. But let's get right into the program, shall we? To get started on the big things. First of all, we have to add an addendum. It's going to be the new thing that we do at the front of the show. Last week we had to do a minor little correction, facetiously to some degree. And this week we have to do a little bit of an addendum, because last week we talked about the health inspectors. And I want to say, first of all, thank you so much to the folks who reached out. We did get a couple of DMs from some health inspectors who thanked us for our not hyperbolic, weird, right? Normally that's what we do, hyperbole and whimsy, for our not hyperbolic coverage, talking about, I don't know what to call it, of the situation with the health inspectors. But one of those people pointed us to a little thing that we got to draw everybody's attention to for a quick sec, because it provides some flavor, if you will. It provides a little bit of extra context, perhaps. For anybody who's unfamiliar, what I'm referring to is the health inspectors in the province of Alberta previously worked for Alberta Health Services. They were under the union HSAA. They are being moved from HSAA to direct government roles. It's going to result in a change of unions. There's this whole letter of understanding thing going on to see what gets covered, what doesn't. There's quite a few health inspectors. We played a clip last week from the Your Province, Your Premier radio show, where a health inspector called in and expressed their concerns that it could potentially result in them having to choose between uprooting their family and their business in rural Alberta, or walking away from their role as health inspector. So there's potentially some things going on here. But somebody sent us a thing. I honestly didn't think I was going to get to do what I'm about to do next, quite possibly ever again. Somebody sent us a little clip, and in that clip, it goes back a couple years, but Dani talks a little bit about her motivations. A lot of people wondering, why move the health inspectors? Well, it's part of the refocusing. It's part of the restructuring. That's one possible explanation, but let's go to a clip from none other than... Hold on 1 second. I haven't done this in a while. I have to make sure I'm ready. This clip. Now, to be clear, the person whose name I'm about to say did not send it to us, but it was posted on their social media, so we went and yoinked it. But this clip was originally posted September 14th, 2024, by none other than Marco Van Hogenbos. Roll the clip.
I think there's been lots of accountability. The Premier lost his job, the Health Minister lost his job, the Chief Medical Officer of Health was fired, the board of the AHS was fired, half the executive of the AHS was fired. I'm taking public health away from Alberta Health Services and bringing it into the department. We've changed the process where they will not have unilateral power to be able to make these kinds of decisions. So I think there have been, the people who are at the helm of the decision making have had the consequences.
So we're right back to COVID. Because of course we are. It's accountability. don't you see? Dani's got to make sure that she holds the people accountable for whom all of the horrible health measures that kept people alive and the health care system on life support, such as it is, as was, would they have to be held accountable. So she's moving the health inspectors into the department. She's moving the health inspectors into the department, presumably to have things at arm's length and in no way interfere or influence the decisions that health inspectors make, because that's not the kind of government that Dani runs. She's all about the arm's length and the. I'm sorry. I tried. I really did try. So a little bit of context is a little bit helpful, perhaps. Moving on from there, though, we got to talk about some big developments that happened in the education sphere over the last little while, because there's two things. And in order to understand the context here, we got to go to Dani's referendum questions. So if you haven't heard, and this is your very first time tuning into this particular show, there's going to be a referendum in the province of Alberta. 10 questions so far. Nope, that's it. We'll talk about that in a minute. There's going to be 10 questions on the referendum. One of the referendum questions is, do you support the government of Alberta introducing a new law mandating that only Canadian citizens, permanent residents, and individuals with an Alberta-approved immigration status will be eligible for provincially funded programs such as healthcare, education, and other social services? Now, on its face, that's gross. It's really gross to say that the only people who should be eligible are the true blood Albertans, or the ones that we've approved of. When we're talking about things like healthcare, the rules that exist already are pretty clear. So there's that. We've talked about that in previous episodes, but it's the education piece that has a lot of people's attention, because what Dani is proposing ostensibly is to say that, hey, if you're not a citizen, permanent resident, or if you're not Alberta approved with your little rubber stamp on your forehead, if you're not one of those three things, you can't send your kids to school, which is so dumb for so many reasons. And let's be very, very clear about that. That is a catastrophic view. The argument is, but we'll save money. See? The counter argument is, cool. What will those kids do then? And there's a bunch of different arguments that can be made about, even if we're talking about a temporary foreign worker who's in Canada for maybe a year, maybe two, and they've brought their kids with them because, I don't know, they like their kids or something. Having those kids have access to education is beneficial, because it means that's one less moron. And less morons is always the right number of morons. Seeing the moron number go down, always a good thing. Oh, but Nate, they could be going back to their countries of origin. They maybe won't go down the permanent residency route, and we'll just have wasted all of that money. No, we won't, because less morons in Alberta is good. Less morons in the world is also good. The fewer ill-informed, dumb people we have roaming the planet, the better. Period. End of sentence. And that goes nothing to say the fact that if kids are going to school while they're here with their families on a temporary basis, not only does that give those kids the education that I'm talking about there, but it also engenders some goodwill towards Canada. So if they go back to their countries of origin, whatever they may be, and one day they're hanging out on the sidewalk, I don't know, the veranda, perhaps a patio, I don't know. And so it's like, oh, those friggin' Canadians, bunch of jerks they are. There's a very good chance that somebody's going to pipe up and be like, whoa, pump the brakes there, friend. My kid got a wonderful education for the 2 years that we were in Canada. It was delightful. You should watch your mouth. Maybe the kid, when they're a little bit older, remembers the wonderful education that they have in Canada. There's nothing wrong with elevating people on a moral and ethical principle. There's nothing wrong with that. And it doesn't actually cost that much when we talk about some of the things that we are wasting money on, which we will be in just a few, well, probably more than a few minutes, but we're going to get to it tonight for sure. It's a little bit more than that, though. And this week, the Alberta Teachers Association put out a statement where they clearly said the Alberta Teachers Association opposes any ballot question in the Alberta referendum that refer to restricting access to provincially public funded education based on a child's immigration status. Children do not choose their immigration status, and they should not be denied an education because of it. Every child in Alberta deserves access to a publicly funded education, period. Damn straight. Schools are places of safety, stability, and opportunity. They must never become places where children or families face the fear of exclusion. Canada signed the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, both of which recognize education as a right for every child, which is 100% right. We have stepped forward as a country and said, we believe in these things called human rights, and we believe that education, access to education, is one of those things. Now, if the Premier of the province wants to step forward and say, well, I see that we have codified education as a human right on the international stage, but, I've been thinking about it, and I just don't think it is. I was fired from my role as a school board trustee, and I stumbled into a role as Premier of Alberta. And with all of the qualifications that I bring to this particular job, I don't think that education should be considered a human right anymore. Post Santa Claus or something to that effect. She hasn't done that. She doesn't have the stones to do that. She's trying to weaponize a populist question in order to get people to say it for her. And I think there's a word for something like that. But I also want to be really, really clear. It's not just the Alberta Teachers Association that stepped forward with a statement. The Alberta School Boards Association came forward on June 1st. So they actually predate the ATA. The Alberta School Boards Association, ASBA, Public, Catholic, and Francophone member school boards came together for the business day of the spring general meeting. During the event, members passed one position statement that will guide provincial advocacy. Be it resolved that ABSA advocate to the government of Alberta that all school-age individuals who are ordinarily resident in Alberta be eligible to receive fully funded K-12 education in Alberta's public, separate, and francophone school boards, recognizing children's right to education as described in the Convention of the Rights of the Child. So it turns out there's a lot of you have the ATA, who are the teachers union. You have the school boards for private, Catholic, and francophone, which is, to be clear, most of them saying, hey, this isn't an economic argument. This isn't a immigration argument. This is a who are we as a people argument. Do we believe that all kids deserve a right to public education, or don't we? Well, we do. And so that's our position on it. And it's important that people in those positions of leadership, authority, what have you, they express those, because it's very, very important that we define our values and then we stand up for them, because you can't be selective about human rights. You can't be selective about those sorts of values. There's that. Moving on from there. Danielle Smith provided the province kind of an impromptu, if you will, update on the state of pipelines. She tweeted out on June 16th. Last year, Alberta's government helped launch the new North American initiative led by the University of Calgary School of Public Policy. Yesterday, I was glad to join them for their inaugural summit focused on next generation leadership for a shared continent. How's that North American Free Trade Act thing going? Anyways, this initiative is helping train the next generation of leaders and continues to build and strengthen relationships across the continent while promoting the free trade of goods and services. As critical trading partners, Canada, the United States, and Mexico have much to offer each other and the world. And that's some boilerplate pro-globalism stuff. So not really anything to say there. But a clip. Oh, there's a clip. A clip of her comments at her little fireside chat leaked out And it's pretty telling.
So it's basically about government helping the industry manage the risk on the downside.
So much is de-risking.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the name of the game that we're talking about with the federal government and trying to get this new pipeline to the West Coast. The reason no one is stepping up saying, hey, pick me, is because the governments have created so much uncertainty over the last 10 years and so much cost that nobody's willing to partner until they know it's a sure thing.
Oh, uncertainty's bad. These governments creating their uncertainty with their, I don't know, separation referendums, maybe, their anti-immigration referendums. I can't imagine how that would be helping the business case. So there's that piece. There's an inherent irony that Danielle Smith will say, oh, we need certainty. We have to avoid uncertainty. We have to de-risk things. As a government, we have to make decisions to de-risk things. And talking about the political climate, it's a little disingenuous, hypocritical, dishonest. I'm not sure what the word is, to say, hey, the feds, they're so bad with their destabilizing all of the things. I'm just going to have this referendum on separatism that would completely throw the regulatory environment on its head. Please don't pay attention to that. But the other pieces that are important to sort of flesh out of there is no one is stepping up for the pipelines. So as much as Danielle Smith has been saying with her memorandum of understanding with the feds, oh, we're going to get a pipeline, we're going to get a pipeline, we're going to get a pipeline. In private-ish, she seems to be saying, maybe we won't get a pipeline, maybe we need to de-risk it. And that gets to what does de-risking mean to folks like Danielle Smith? Because historically, part of her de-risking strategy has been, what if we just gave you a lot of money? What if we did that? And that's been a strategy that's been used on pipelines. For anybody who's not familiar with the big expansion pipeline that we just had, that the country literally had to buy and build and then sell off chunks of in order to try to get some money back after it came in, I think, 4 times over budget. That's what de-risking looks like. And de-risking to companies from a government standpoint is great. Because if you say to a company, hey, I understand that you want to get all of this product out. We'd like to get it out faster because we want more money faster. There's so many off-brand medications that we need to buy. Please, come and move the stuff out of the ground quicker. That is certainly one of the options. But when the government says, and we're going to pay for all of the infrastructure in order for you to do that, that's where the flaws start to maybe creep in a little bit. Because Danielle Smith loves to talk about, and I want to be very, very clear. I'm a big believer in the market of the things. I do think that there is from time to time government intervention that is required in the market of the things. I think regulation is a very important piece of the market of the things. However, when somebody spends most of their time preaching about free market capitalism and how capitalism unfettered is the best way to go always, and then when proven otherwise says, okay, but what if we just use taxpayers' money to make these things happen so that I can keep talking about how wonderful free market capitalism is while I'm justifying building out capitalism into the healthcare system? How would that go? It's bullshit. There's no pure capitalist system that works anywhere in the world for any length of time without inflicting massive amounts of human suffering. That's just how it works. And in the environments where the regulations haven't been put in place by governments, those are the environments where people tend to be exploited the worst. So having regulations, those things in place, is a good thing. But having the rhetoric around free market capitalism is just the only way to go is wildly disingenuous. And for Danielle Smith to be saying, look, we have to de-risk the industries. We have to, as the government, assume, as the representatives of the taxpayer, as the taxpayers by proxy, we have to assume all of the risk for the corporations so that they can maximize their profits and we can still get some money, that's not great. In industries like oil and gas, it's not a good business model because as long as there's a market, they're going to want to come and get the stuff. We can dictate the terms. Alberta has historically gutted our royalty rates because we are so desperate to have people come and take our oil and gas out of the ground. If it really is as glorious as Danielle Smith pitches it, we shouldn't have to be doing all of this de-risking. But certainly at the same time, if Danielle Smith is making the argument that the pure capitalist model doesn't work in something as basic as oil and gas, for Danielle Smith to be going ahead with more privatized, more profitized healthcare because we need competition, we need all of the principles of capitalism, is bullshitty. It's a little bullshitty. Moving on from there, and this is where we're going to get into the weeds, because boy, let me tell you, I did not see this piece coming. Hey, Sundry. This is so bonkers. What was presented as a simple story of, there was a float. It had Alberta flags. The parade organizers were a little confused. It might be too political. And so they initially said no. But then people got very, very angry. They did. And so the parade organizers said, okay, you can have your float in. But then people got even more angry because they got what they wanted. And there were death threats. It's a parade, y'all. You need to calm down. But there were death threats over this parade. So the parade organizers said, fine, we're shutting the parade down. We can't put people at risk. And in the climate of death threats, that's a reasonable choice. And that, thus far, has been the story. But there's so much more to this story. Let's go back to set the stage as to why Sundry might have been, I don't know, a little squirrely about surprises in parade entries. We got to go back to 2022, where we had this make national news. If you're unfamiliar, or if you're listening to the audio version, in 2022, there was a tractor and a manure spreader that were not officially approved in the parade. They just showed up to the parade and got in line. And the volunteers who were working this parade in rural Alberta, they didn't have lists of, here are all of the people who are allowed to be on the parade today. Oh, sir, I do not believe your tractor and manure spreader is acceptable. You're not on the list. We're going to have to ask you to go to the Smitty's parking lot, and you do not get to be part of this parade, sir. They didn't have that information. So the parade and the manure spreader just rolled up, joined the parade, and then once the parade had started, one of the people involved in this particular float, the person driving the tractor, threw on a Justin Trudeau mask. The other person, and this is where it got really problematic, threw on a turban and a fake beard and was very clearly trying to do some kind of a caricature of then NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. So there's some racist shit going on here. No question. It's like blackface, but not quite black. So Sundry got in the national news for that, and there was a lot of furor over that. It was not a good time by any stretch of the imagination. And that was with the Sundry Pro Rodeo. So it's unsurprising, with a little bit of controversy, that Sundry Pro Rodeo might be a little bit gun shy, because they issued this statement here where they talked about some of the problems that they were having. I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs from it real quick. After hearing concerns from all sides, the association we'll go to the beginning. The Sundry Pro Rodeo and Race Association regrets to announce the cancellation of the 2026 parade. In recent weeks, a parade entry decision generated significant public discussion and strong opinions from many individuals. Following that decision, volunteers from both the parade committee and the rodeo committee became the target of an overwhelming volume of online criticism, personal attacks, harassment, and abusive messages. These volunteers are members of our community who dedicate countless hours each year to organizing events that benefit Sundre and its residents. They're not paid employees, nor are they public figures, for the most part. They are neighbors, friends, parents, business owners, and community members who volunteer their time because they care deeply about their event and this event in our town. After hearing concerns from all sides, the association reconsidered its original decision, reached out directly to the float organizers, apologized, and invited them to participate in the parade. Despite those efforts, the volume of hostility directed towards volunteers continued to grow. The decision to cancel the parade is not a statement about any political viewpoint, movement, or cause. The Sundre Pro Rodeo and Race Association respect the right of individuals to hold and express differing opinions. This decision was made because of the ongoing attacks directed at volunteers have created an environment that is no longer conducive to organizing and delivering the community-focused event that residents have come to expect. Rena, a bunch more. In additional media reports, that's where the death threat part was mentioned. So that's the story kind of sort of so far. But then we get to this weekend because there was this event for the love. They made a heart out of the O in love. That's how you can tell they mean it. Of Sundre Cruise, June 20th. People of Sundre, Alberta has your back. Alberta will bring the parade to you. And that event was put on by a group called Cruise to Independent, Alberta Independence. So parade's canceled. That sucks. You know what we should do as a political group? We should do a slow roll through the town of Sundre and bury them in all of the Alberta flags and all of those things. So that's pretty wild. So the separatists bullied the shit. Allegedly, there were death threats that were made out of the parade organizers because they were so upset that one float that apparently just had a bunch of Alberta flags, as was described. And again, as we've seen, there's some folks that have acted in bad faith in these parades in the past. And so now we have to take a look at who was the float submitter. And this is where we start to lean into the wild, because the person who submitted the float, this dude right here, his name is Zane Novak. And you're not ready for this. You are not ready for where this is going. It's a nice picture of Zane there. He's got his cowboy hat on. Zane's got a bit of a history. He was the president, I think, CEO, one of those things, of the Kirby Center in Calgary for a good number of years before he took a run for mayor. He did not win in that election. Jyoti Gondek won the mayoral race. Zane was like, I don't know, 7th or 8th on the list, something like that. It did not go well in Zane's favor. And so Zane needed something to do. And this is where we got that photo is so important, because we lifted that photo from one of Zane's social media posts that I'll read to you now. Today is my birthday. The last 12 months have been one of the most diverse, crazy experiences in my life. Ran for mayor of Calgary. I'm involved in Element CG, where we are now creating CBD and THC oils from cannabis and hemp. Karnia Novak, Dylan Reese Krause, and I have taken our skincare line, Creations by Zane, to market. And I've embarked on one of the most of my most exciting challenges yet. TBA 2022, Take Back Alberta. Check it out or send me a message and I'll fill you in. So Zane Novak, it's true. Before David Parker sort of metastasized his way through Take Back Alberta, and it became his personal vehicle, Zane Novak started Take Back Alberta. And it gets even more fun. He also put up a post some time ago. You might have noticed on my story feeds posts referring to TBA 2022. What is Take Back Alberta, you ask? Here's a link to Rick Bell's column from yesterday, where Rick interviewed me It talks a little bit about TBA. I'll be on the Rob Breckenridge Show, QR 770 radio this morning, Friday, March 4th. Listen in. Now, this was obviously a few years ago. But we took a look at that Rick Bell story, and I would like to read a little bit of it now, because in the question for Jason Kenney's leadership, here's what Rick Bell had to say. One big player is Take Back Alberta, and they're meeting people face to face. They're not promoting anyone to replace Kenney. They're not even on social media. They want to build momentum in living rooms, barns, workshops, community halls. Zane Novak is one of about a dozen at meetings across Alberta every night, where most who attend are not political players. In the past, they voted. That's it. Well, at that point, Zane had kind of run for mayor, Rick, so solid on the fact checking. Novak says folks are sick and tired of Kenney not taking on the Trudeau crowd, thinking he's just a federalist and not an Albertan first. People feel Kenney has disrespected them. He flip-flops, just follows polls, and isn't a true leader. Quote, everyone feels he changes his tune to whatever the story is for the day and whatever the audience is in the room. End quote. That doesn't sound familiar at all to, I don't know, Alberta's current situation. COVID did, quote, get a lot of people out of their basements and into meetings. The trucker convoy also got a lot of individuals thinking. So that's the Zane Novak. And Zane has, there were many people when he had his mayoral campaign, they were like, oh, this guy was associated with the Kirby Center. He seems like he's got a pretty even keel. Well, as we've seen with many people coming out of the pandemic, that keel perhaps unkeeled a little bit, because in the wake of the death of Charlie Kirk, Zane Novak put up this post. Today is a tragic day. There is no such thing as my truth, your truth, their truth. There only exists all caps truth. And Charlie spoke, and in this twisted leftist woke world, he paid with his life. He used reason and logic. They responded with hate and violence. So Mr. Novak very clearly has some strong feelings about the woke and the left. I want to be very, very clear. Charlie Kirk should not have been shot. I don't have a problem saying that. It is a bad thing that Charlie Kirk was shot. Charlie Kirk was also not a very nice man. He said some very, very horrible things, and he incited a lot of hatred. Many things can be true at the same time. True, all caps. True, for the record. I am such a child sometimes. But Zane hasn't gone away. One of the things that, and this is just a recent story from May 14th, 2026. There's a new organization that Zane is a part of, Let's Talk Alberta. And this story from Okotoks, independence crowd in Okotoks told to expect referendum. Speakers at a Let's Talk Alberta event said a judge's decision on petition about independence won't stop the issue from going for a vote. Spokespeople for the independence movement in Alberta told a crowd in Okotoks that they are confident a separatist referendum will be held this fall. Independence advocates, Zane Novak, Corey Morgan, Tanya Clements, and Chris Scott spoke to about 100 people during an event at the Viking Rental Center on May 13th. So, all of this being said, it's pretty clear that Mr. Novak is not just a random figure in Alberta politics. That's you just can't do that. And this is where the overlap and the layers start to get really, really interesting, because if we go back to that cruise to Alberta independence, the organizers of that Facebook page, that Facebook group right there, when we take a look at who that is, and I have no interest in hunting down their real names, but they identify themselves as Mr. and Mrs. Al Burton. You see, his first name's Al, and his last name's it's such a clever play on words. Those are the two people who are responsible for the Cruise to Alberta Independence Facebook page. They regularly post little live streams where you can see the Corey Morgan signs on their front yard. And Corey Morgan has identified in his own live streams Mr. and Mrs. Al Burton as volunteers with his campaign. So those are the folks that are responsible for the slow roll through the town of Sundre with all of the separatists from people all over the province. It's a whole thing. But we're still not done. Seriously, this whole Sundre thing has just been the layers are so delightful, because there was that statement that was issued by Sundre Pro Rodeo, and in media coverage, there's a bunch of places that went up to Sundre and they did some video. They had a spokesperson for Sundre Pro Rodeo who was speaking about the harassment and the death threats, which, to be clear, before we go any further, totally unacceptable, absolutely should be condemned. If you are somebody who's issuing death threats over a parade, I don't care what kind of parade it is, you need to give your head a shake. Like, you're taking life way too seriously. There are real conversations to be had about who should and shouldn't be allowed in parades. And there's real conversations to be had about who's entering parade floats in good faith and in bad faith, and who's going to play games with what sort of banners or posters they're going to put midway, or masks they're going to throw on midway through the parade. There's lots of conversations to be had about all of that stuff, for sure. But if you're threatening violence or making death threats because of a parade, you might be an idiot. I'm not saying for sure. There are medical professionals that can help you with that, but it's possible. Talk to your doctor. But we got to go back to the spokesperson, because the spokesperson that has been identified in those media reports is one Darby Crouch. It's so bonkers. Sundre, what are you doing, Sundre? How do you get all of this in one place, one tiny little geographic area? Darby Crouch is a longtime rodeo supporter, announcer, media figure. But that's not all that Darby Crouch has accomplished with her life, because when Nenshi became leader of the NDP, he had to run in a by-election eventually when Smith finally called it. And the UCP, they did run a candidate. They did. And that candidate was none other than Darby Crouch. She was the UCP candidate for Edmonton Strathcona in the race against Naheed Nenshi. What a small world. What a crazy, crazy small world. But wait, there's more. Because as it turns out, when she's not, and I want to be clear, I'm not dunking on anyone for volunteering for their community. I'm not dunking on anyone for being involved with rodeo. Some of my favorite childhood memories are around rodeo and small town events and small town parades and all of that kind of good stuff. So I want to be very, very clear. I am not mocking that at all. But I do find it fascinating that the spokesperson for the Sundre Pro Rodeo ran for the UCP and is currently the chief of staff to Alberta's Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation. All of this in this one little story about a parade. It's so bonkers. It's so Alberta politics. I just love it so much because there's so much going on in all of these little directions that all manage to overlap in this one the town of Sundre. It's delightful. Moving on from there. Getting back into a little bit more serious fare, and then we're gonna have some fun at the end because Dan Williams. It's just the gift that keeps on giving in the worst possible ways. But let's talk about some of the developments that have happened in regards to the referendum stuffs and the ongoing conversation that's taking place between, I don't know if you can really call it a conversation at this point. It's just sort of disappointing that's taking place between the government of Alberta and First Nations folks. Now, this is where I'm going to do another plug for no reason other than I just really enjoyed reading her work. Brandy Morin did an excellent column on this whole situation. highly, highly recommend that if you're not following her Substack, that you go ahead and do that because it's so good. But we saw this week on June 17th, the Assembly of Treaty Chiefs demanded from the RCMP an investigation into the Premier, Danielle Smith, and the UCP for treason. Reading from the release, the Assembly of First Nations, the Assembly of Treaty Chiefs, AOTC, of Treaty 6, 7, and 8 has unanimously passed a resolution calling for an investigation by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, and Auditor General into the actions of Premier Danielle Smith and members of the UCP to determine whether they constitute treason under Section 46 of the Criminal Code of Canada. Bunch of numbers. The vote took place in a duly convened meeting on Treaty 7 territory in Calgary on June 16th, 2026. We call for this investigation on the basis of the intentional violation of treaties, of calling a referendum in the face of severe risks to Canada's sovereignty and the treaty relationship, and failing to take action on the violation of privacy rights of millions of people. Further, Premier Danielle Smith and the UCP government have done all of this with significant risks of foreign interference and influence. At the time of treaty, the Northwest Mounted Police, now the RCMP, committed to ensuring the safety of First Nations and our treaties, and that the Crown guarantees the peace and goodwill mutually promised between the First Nations and the Crown in exchange for sharing these lands. United the Chiefs of Treaty Number 6, Treaty Number 7, Treaty Number 8 territories now call for the fulfillment of this commitment in the form of a full investigation. So that's not nothing. There's been a lot of unanimous decisions from the Treaty Chiefs of Alberta. Sorry, Treaty Chiefs of the treaties in Alberta. I apologize for phrasing it that way. There's been a lot. They unanimously had a vote of non-confidence in the Premier and her government, and now they're unanimously calling for her to be investigated by the RCMP for treason. And that sparked a lot of debate. And it's worth noting that they did not call for her to be charged with treason. They charged for her to be investigated for treason. There's certain elements to treason that are very, very, very particular. Is there a reasonable argument to be made that Danielle Smith has been engaging in bad faith with just about everybody? Absolutely. Do we have all of the evidence to say that she's a traitor per the legal definition? We would probably need an investigation to determine that. But boy, oh boy, did Dani's besties not have any time for that. Rob Anderson very quickly came out. What a dangerous and irresponsible. You should think about how you use words, says Rob Anderson. What a dangerous and irresponsible letter by Treaty Chiefs, asking the RCMP to investigate and charge a premier with treason because you disagree with her policy to hold a referendum in this case is a dark path that we see in third world banana republics. It is wrong, it is un-Albertan, and it is un-Canadian, period. And if anybody would know how governments that behave like banana republics would behave, I'm not saying, I'm just saying Rob would probably have a pretty good idea for how they like to treat their adversaries. And speaking of that, let's take a look at Dani's other right hand man. Bruce McAllister came out with this screed. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'll leave it on the screen for a second. If you want to read the whole thing, you can if you want. But it was basically trying to flip the script on the First Nation chiefs, saying, yeah, but you suck at government, and I'm going to reiterate all of the tropes that exist about First Nations. I'm going to do all of the racist dog whistles in one shot, as if these things only exist on First Nations territories. And I'm going to completely ignore that pretty much all of these things are a direct result of, I don't know, a couple hundred years of colonialism and attempted genocide. I mean, I would imagine it does take some folks a little bit of time to recover from a national program of genocide, of cultural destruction. I would imagine that it takes a little while to recover from that, especially when you have people who are in high-ranking positions of government doing all of these repeated tropes and not at the same time taking any sort of responsibility or acknowledging the responsibility that the institutions have for the continued infliction of generational trauma on First Nations folks. And that's an important distinction. I'm just going to dwell on that for a second before I take another run at little Bruce over there. There's a lot of people who hear conversations or hear people use phrasing or terminology around the genocide that was inflicted and attempted on First Nations people, and they go, oh, but don't like that. That's not my idea of Canada. And that's cool. It's not. That just means that your idea of Canada and history is inaccurate. And I don't have a problem with people who don't know the things. They don't understand that pretty much any society is built on the bones of somebody. And that's not a good thing that you have to acknowledge. I don't have a problem with people not maybe knowing that, because that's not the stories that they were raised with, but it doesn't change the reality of it. We've talked about the Indian Act many times on the shows before, and the horrifying things that the Indian Act inflicted on people, the ways that the governance structure that was enforced on First Nations folks. It's worth remembering, as much as the treaty chiefs are speaking out over here, those are treaty chiefs who have been chosen not using the traditional ways that First Nations and Indigenous leadership was chosen. Those are leaders who were chosen through the colonial democratic way that was inflicted on them through the Indian Act. If you don't believe me, Google it. Google hereditary chiefs versus elected chiefs. It's a whole thing. And I want to be very clear again. I'm not saying that the people who are currently leading any of those First Nations are bad people. I'm just saying that the leadership roles that they're in exist and are defined by legislation, rules that are totally external to what the culture of those various peoples were. That's that. The second thing that I want to just say about the whole genocide piece, because people do get uncomfortable with that, and that's okay. You're allowed to be uncomfortable. There's a big difference between acknowledging that the institutions that have gotten Canada to where they are have in the past behaved in horrifying ways. And they have. There's lots of examples in history where Canadian government, provincial governments have done really, really, really terrible things. To say that those things happened is not a reflection on any individual other than the people who were directly or indirectly or implicitly involved in those things. I do not personally bear any responsibility for the creation of the Indian Act. I don't have any, I had nothing to do with it. Can I acknowledge that that is a thing that has happened and probably should be addressed and changed? Absolutely. Can I acknowledge that residential schools were a horrifying thing that were inflicted on a lot of First Nations peoples against their wills entirely, where there was rampant abuse and where, yes, kids died? Can I acknowledge all of that and go at the same time, I did not do that? 100%. Those two things can be true. There's a difference between accepting institutional responsibility and accepting personal responsibility. The question around personal responsibility has to do with, now that you know these things, what are you going to do? Now that you know that there is a system that did those things, are you going to be a voice that says, oh, we should probably address the flaws in the system that allowed that to happen, make sure it never ever happens again, because that's not great? Or are you going to be a voice that goes, la, 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 and just pretend? That's the difference. That's the only question. You don't need to feel bad. You just need to do something. There's my rant about that. But let's get back to Bruce, because I'm feeling pugilistic tonight. Bruce has had a week. He has. That was not his only controversial tweet. It was probably the most controversial tweet, but he had some other controversial tweets. And let's take a look at another one of those real quick. He retweeted CTV News. CTV put up a story saying MPs urge action to undercut manosphere by tackling anti-women ideology. Bruce McAllister, former news anchor, host of, I think, the morning show. This is truly disappointing from a major network, or any network for that matter. There are so many issues the public would rather see reported. I'm not sure about that. I remember when media used to present both sides and let the public decide. I remember when I was at Global TV like 20 years ago, we did a deep dive into possible marijuana legislation. I did the anti-piece. The legendary Louis Kudus took the pro side. Then we had a poll and a discussion panel. It was engaging, informative, and presented both sides, and I imagine probably sold some advertising hours as well. That's my editorializing for the record. That's it. It's really not that complicated. Too much of the focus these days is clearly supportive of woke, anti-conservative, activist issues pushing manosphere panic, gender ideology in schools, endless climate alarmism, open border framing, and identity politics over practical solutions for family, energy workers, and everyday Albertans. Rana. We need better. Return to real balance and let the public decide. Bonus for them is viewers might return, and who knows, maybe even advertisers. That's Bruce, that is. Bruce seen right here. Looking terribly masculine. I respect a man who can pull off eyeliner in the way that Bruce does. I will not lie. I do try to shave before the show. I did give myself a little pass with a razor before tonight's show. I've never felt the need though to go the eyeliner and I think that's the what is that, laser brows? I don't know. And to be clear, I am not criticizing any man who is that focused on their physical appearance. I'm not judging that in any way whatsoever. I do think it is worth noting though that Bruce is looking his most coiffed. As in this file photo, he's speaking, introducing the Alberta Update, his media program, which is taxpayer funded. It's the Bruce McAllister Propaganda Hour, as some people have taken to calling it. It's usually only about 25 minutes. I don't know if Bruce could do 2 hours. But the 25 minutes that he does, where he interviews and has serious, hard-hitting conversations with only members of government. So the state propagandist for Danielle Smith would like to give the media a lecture on how they should behave and cover issues, which is, let's be clear, some next level bullshit. But let's go back to the content, because the whole thing that the Bruce was very, very angry about, the whole thing he was frustrated with, was the criticism of the manosphere. And if we take a quick look at what he was talking about, let's take a look at that CTV story. MPs urge action to undercut manosphere by tackling anti-women ideology. Now, to be clear, Bruce does not believe that we should be talking about anybody who's pushing anti-women ideology. Now, I'm sure there are some people who might view that as a red flag. Perhaps there are some people who might view that as the comments that would be made by somebody who, I don't know, repeatedly has an extensive file with HR. I'm just speculating here. But what did that story actually say? Let's take a quick look, because I think it is relevant and it is important. MPs urge action to undercut manosphere by tackling anti-women ideology. Okay. I would like to raise my hand as a man and say, I'm in no way threatened by that. I don't have a problem with that. I think that people who do blame all of their problems on women, I don't think that's good. I think that there's some perhaps personal responsibility, maybe, Bruce, that people need to take for their actions and their choices, and how that affects their overall life quality. This is the incel bullshit that we're talking about. This is that toxic masculinity that is just, it's just garbage. What did they actually ask for? MPs are calling on the government to tackle the rise of anti-feminist ideology by funding programs that undercut the manosphere of online influencers who blame women for men's problems. It's the incels, the involuntary celibate, those that believe that they should have unfettered, unrestricted access to women, period, end of sentence. Let's be clear. When we're talking about toxic masculinity is the false arrogance that insecure men use to try to hide that insecurity because they lack confidence in themselves and their capabilities. We're not talking about arrogance. We're talking about confidence. Arrogance is something that needs to be articulated and expressed to the world. Confidence is knowing that's not necessary. Confidence doesn't lose their minds and try to farm outrage over a report from the federal government that says, hey, there's some folks out there who are trying to take advantage of young men who are struggling with identity issues and navigating an economy that's not particularly friendly to, I don't know, fucking anybody right now. And they're trying to say, rather than this is a product of politicians, this is a product of lack of education, this is a product of not having the right kind of social skills. Rather than saying any of that, they're saying, you know what is the cause of your problem, Timmy? It's the women folk. It's the women folk who are to blame for your insecurities. You should be angry at them. It's the enemy. It's just instead of making the enemy the immigrants or what have you, well, let's just say all women. Let's say it's all women's fault. And you see this in online areas where there are people who will say with their full chests that the function of women should not be to work. Women shouldn't even want to have jobs. They shouldn't want to have jobs. They shouldn't want to find self-fulfillment through work. Their jobs, they should be making the babies. I don't know, maybe there's some leaders of the separatist movement who were recently caught saying exactly that kind of tripe. And here's Bruce saying, we shouldn't be having a conversation around the toxic masculinity or the male loneliness epidemic, as many people have called it, that have caused disproportionate suicide rates among men. We shouldn't be talking about that stuff. We should let men be angry at all of the wrong things so they can solve none of their problems. That's what Bruce apparently is arguing for. But let's get back to his other his gross comment, because I love the class that the Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation has shown throughout this whole shit show. Because they issued a statement saying, if yesterday's comments by Bruce McAllister, executive director of Danielle Smith's office, were made by a senior staffer in a premier's office in any other province, they would be fired. They're not wrong. The comments that Bruce McAllister made about First Nations folks, absolutely grounds for termination in any other non-parallel universe. We cannot afford to radicalize this type of racist language in Alberta. We see what happens when this is accepted south of the border. It's a slippery slope. We look forward to his public apology. To date, Bruce has not issued a public apology. Moving on from there. Let's talk about Danny Bucks. No, that's Bruce again. I think we've had enough of him. Let's go to the Danny Bucks. Danielle Smith, after much ballyhooing from Rick Bell. Rick Bell, oh, she's gonna bring the money, folks. She's gonna make the difference. And Danielle Smith announced her program, and it's basically, if you're an adult in Alberta and you filed your taxes last year, 2025, you may have 100 whole dollars. That's right, 100 whole dollars. Ralph Bucks were at least, I think, 400. Danny comes forward with 100 for every Albertan. Now, I want to be clear. There are a good number of folks for who that $100 means they're going to be able to buy some things that maybe they can't afford to buy, like, I don't know, food. There's going to be some folks for whom this will make a small and temporary difference. I don't want to minimize that. But to frame this as anything other than a cynical bribe at a quarter of what Ralph Klein brought to the table is pretty laughable. To do so while cutting programs like AISH and ADAP is just mean. It's just mean. That's all it is. And let's be clear. I want to make it very clear again. She is cutting programs like AISH and ADAP. The overall amount that people will get will be less. We had a whole, if you haven't listened to the open mic that we had Cassandra on, and we had a very in-depth conversation about the history of AISH, the intentions of AISH, the moral imperatives that exist around making sure that you're caring for people. We had a whole thing around all of that, and it's definitely worth listening to. But Dani's popularity it's not doing too great. We saw recent polling that we talked about on last week's live show that she's at the lowest approval rating that she's been at since she came to office. So that's super bad by most reasonable metrics. But let's get into what the Dani Bucks announcement got us, because while $100 is nice, if you drive a small car, it will buy you a tank of gas. If you drive a pickup truck, it will not. But we got ourselves a presser. We did coming out of that. And there's a lot to unpack here. We're going to start with the question that was asked in regards to the Treaty 6, 7, and 8 chiefs unanimously calling for an investigation by the RCMP into Danielle Smith and her government for treason.
Treaty chiefs are calling for an investigation into whether your actions over the independence referendum amount to treason under the criminal code. What's your response to that?
Well, I think it's disgraceful. I think it's disgraceful that any government that wants to be taken seriously would level charges that serious against another government. Look, I've had my differences with the federal government, but I have never used language like that. I would ask the treaty chiefs to check themselves, because we have a very collaborative relationship between our government and our ministers. I want that to continue. But this kind of overwrought language has no place in a democracy. When they were pursuing a new relationship with Ottawa, I cheered them along. We are pursuing a new relationship with Ottawa that respects our jurisdiction, and I would ask that they be respectful of that. But they need to, that language has no place in this democratic discussion.
Okay, and what steps are you taking to rebuild trust with the treaty chiefs?
We meet with them regularly, and in fact, I meet with them one-on-one. My ministers meet with them one-on-one. We have protocol tables where I bring a number of my ministers together. And you know what I've asked them? I say, well, how many times have you met with the Prime Minister when he's brought together 10 or 14 of his ministers to deal with your concerns? And you know what the answer is? Never. It doesn't happen, ever. So that is the kind of relationship we want to continue to have with the chiefs, but it can only be done if they show as much respect for my government as we have shown for them.
Now, let's be clear. When we're talking about the kind of respect that Danielle Smith and her government have shown for treaty chiefs, we've got Spanky over there throwing out his racist dog whistle tropes around First Nations folks from the Premier's office, from the position of the executive director of the Premier's office. We've got Bruce McAllister throwing stuff out there with no apologies, no criticism from Danielle Smith. We've got Danielle Smith using taxpayers' money to fund the appeal on the decision by the judge to shut down the original, semi-original, version 2.0 separatist question. Taxpayers' money is going towards that. Against the chiefs, against First Nations. The treaty chiefs have said Danielle Smith absolutely should not. They didn't just come out of nowhere and be like, oh, it's a day that ends in Y. We should say that Dani's doing treason. They didn't do that. That's absolutely not what happened. Danielle Smith and the UCP have systematically been disrespecting First Nations and the treaty chiefs for at least a couple years, to say nothing of the fact, I don't know how you, I am so respectful of First Nations folks and the importance of culture. That's why I claimed to be it. Danielle Smith has at times claimed to be Métis with no evidence to support it. She's also claimed to be, I can't remember what the other one was, an American one. And APTN did a whole investigation, was not able to find any evidence to support it. Danielle Smith did not at any point apologize for pretending. She just, well, that's what my mom told me. That's not a good enough excuse. It is, in fact, disrespectful. The way that Danielle Smith has taken a performative approach to interfacing with treaty chiefs is a disgrace not only to her, but to the entire government. And when we have morons like Spanky, I believe moron. I have no proof that Bruce McAllister is a moron. I cannot definitively say he's a moron. He has given me evidence to believe, though, he perhaps lacks some self-awareness and perhaps some foresight. So do with that what you will. But he's out there offending all of the First Nations folks, and Danielle Smith is just like, la la la. I'm not going to worry about that. I will say the response from, again, Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation to Dani's little rant there. Community notice. Wednesday's comments by the Premier has us reflecting, and we took some time to, quote, check ourselves, end quote. After careful review, the only issue identified was that it's still not quite quitting time. We're just getting started. Thanks, Dani. Happy Saturday, everybody. I love that. I love the tone there. But that was not the only important clip that came out of that, because it turns out Water Not Coal got its questions shut down, certainly not answered.
Will the Water Not Coal questions be had to the October referendum?
Well, I'll tell you a bit about the process that we have for citizen-initiated petitions. Is that they go before a legislative committee. So the Forever Canada petition went before a committee of MLAs, so it's both parties, and then they took hearings, got legal advice, and then made a determination about how to proceed with that. And so this particular legislative proposal will follow the same pathway, that it will go forward to a legislative committee that has to be assembled when we get back into the legislature in the fall, and then they'll decide what direction to take with it. There's some implications on private property rights that we would have to consider, because we have legislation that requires compensation in the event that private property rights are taken away. There's an implication as well for the fact that there's already been a referendum locally on one of these projects. That will also have to be taken into consideration. And so I would be looking forward to seeing what the committee would come up with as they assess. There's multiple elements to this particular proposal, and it could result in a legislative proposal where we bring forward legislation into the legislature, or it could result in a recommendation for a province-wide vote, which would take place in October of 2027. We did receive notification from Elections Alberta that we had to have the final questions in by June the 1st in order for them to be able to prepare and hire enough people for the October 19th referendum. So this one came in a little bit late, and they still have to validate the signatures. So we're waiting for that validation process. But that would be the steps that would happen. The validation would occur. Starting in September, we'd put together a new legislative committee. There'd be various hearings and testimony that would be called before, and then they'll make a recommendation to the legislature about whether to proceed with a bill or whether to proceed with a referendum.
Got to follow the rules. It's not like you can just issue a press release before the process is finished saying that the process is finished. You certainly can't can't do anything like that here in Alberta. They did that with the Forever Canadian petition. So unfortunately, the Water Not Coal petition is going to be kicked at least after the next provincial election, because we do enter that 1 year blackout period, and then it just has to be held before the following provincial election, depending on the results of that election and the gerrymandering and everything that's going on with that. So it's to say that there were a lot of people who were hurt and disappointed and frustrated by the fact that Danielle Smith moved mountains to make sure that the separatists got their question, because direct democracy is so important to her, purest form of democracy, despite the fact that that's what the line that Dani used over and over and over again, and why she steamrolled the Forever Canadian petition. Despite all of that, when it comes to the question of the Water Not Coal, that's where she's like, whoa, guys, we got to follow the rule. But NDP leader Naheed Nenshi had some thoughts about that.
Danielle Smith has said that she'll be following the process under the Citizen Initiative Act for the Water Not Coal petition. That could potentially push the actual referendum back at least 4 years down the road. Do you believe that the Premier should issue the Water Not Coal question as written by Corb Lund, under the Referendum Act, as she has with her 9 other questions, to ensure that it's included in the October referendum if the signatures are verified?
Look, what? Verifying signatures? We do that? I thought you just had to say you had the signatures and the Premier would agree with you. Oh no, only if she owes you something. So yes, of course she should. She has the powers today to make this happen. Unlike Thomas Lukaszuk, Corb Lund was clear from the day one that he wanted a referendum. So she's forcing a referendum and blaming it on Lukaszuk, who said on day one he didn't want a referendum. And for Corb, who said he wanted a referendum on day one, the Premier is pretending that this is not the case. She has the power to issue this today. If she wants to wait till July 1st to see when the signatures get ratified, she can issue it on July 1st. Her own legislation gives her the power. She did it for her separatist friends. She should do it for the Albertans who want to protect our watershed.
And then she's not wrong. And to be clear, Danielle Smith absolutely could. She could say, no, we're putting this on the referendum. She could have done that at any point. Once Corb Lund had said, hey, we've got the signatures, and Corb Lund has said in multiple media interviews in print, so I have no clips for you, but he said that he had direct conversations with Danielle Smith, and she led him to believe, and of course, with Dani, the direct verbiage does matter, but she led him to believe that if he got the signatures, then it would be included. And she certainly, there's been lots of clips making the rounds for the last week of Danielle Smith saying things in such a way that it could be interpreted both ways, as opposed to giving a straight answer. So that's not great. But with the referendum piece, it gets to be the size of the referendum piece. The June 1st deadline is actually, I believe that. I believe that Elections Alberta came forward and said, free of external influence from Dani, we're going to need some time to put this monstrosity together, because you've got 9, probably 10, turns out 10 questions where we have to build out all the infrastructure for that. We have to print the ballots. We have to do all of that. And a recent news story came out on June 17th that talked about what the likely cost is. And this is not nothing. This is a former chief electoral officer with Elections Alberta. So he's got a pretty good handle on how much it costs to do these things. Lauren Gibson, who has also worked on elections in Manitoba and Saskatchewan, said his figures show price tag is well into 9 figures. From the CTV story, October's vote will consist of 10 different questions on 45 million total ballots. By comparison, 1.7 million ballots were cast in Alberta's 2023 provincial election. So 45 times the number of ballots as were in the last provincial election, because there's 10 questions need to be printed. In addition, Elections Alberta has already launched a recruitment drive to hire about 60,000 staff members to execute October's referendum, a task that includes counting all ballots within a 48-hour deadline by hand, because Dani got rid of the Scantron machines because David Parker told her to. That's compared to just 13,095 workers for the last provincial election. So, like, orders of magnitude more work to be done. And this is a self-inflicted wound because the questions are what they are. They have to be on separate ballots the way that they are. They have to be printed on paper. They have to be counted by hand. They have to be counted within 48 hours. All of these are changes that Danielle Smith and the UCP have made, which makes it even more baffling that the new finance minister, the guy who's supposed to be good at the numbers, had this to say.
New estimates show the October referenda could cost as high as $130 million. Would the province approve that number if it were requested by Elections Alberta? And why not save taxpayer money by combining the referenda and a general election?
I don't know what you're referring to as far as those estimates. I can tell you those seem extremely high to be able to run an election. It doesn't cost us this much to run a general election. So I'm not sure why Elections Alberta would need that level of money. Happy to look at that report. What I can tell you is that we'll make sure Elections Alberta has the resources to do the job that they need to do. But I can't see why a province-wide vote would cost any more than it would cost us to run a general election.
What? That's the money. That's the math guy. That's the guy who's supposed to be able to look at budgets and go, this is how much money we have and how much things will cost. And, oh, we may have a problem here. And he can't see how asking every Albertan who's eligible to vote 10 questions and mandating that those votes must be counted by hand across the entire province within 48 hours. He can't wrap his head around how that would take longer. Perhaps there's a metaphor that we could use. Mr. Nixon, you need to think about this like it's wild horses. If you have one wild horse and you want to shoot it, I don't know why you would, but let's say that you do. You'll need at least one bullet. If there are 10 wild horses and you want to shoot them all, again, I do not know why you would. You will need more bullets, sir. I don't know if that helps at all or not. But that wasn't the only sort of stunning moment that came out of the presser because, and we're going to get into this in just a minute, the corrupt care scandal came up as well.
David Wallace and James T. Fiore, two non-Albertans, have been cited for contempt against Athana Mantzalopoulos, a witness in a future trial, and Sandy Emmonston, a witness in a future trial, to say nothing of what they've done to other people. I have not heard anything from yourself or from your Justice Minister expressing concern that there is alleged persecution and intimidation of witnesses. And I'm wondering what you have to say about what has been accused to have happened. And I would hope you wouldn't say, I'm not familiar with that, because you in the legislature last fall made a joke regarding Peter Guthrie, directly related to something said in David Wallace podcast, and your House Minister had to apologize in the House on your behalf.
Well, I don't know them. And as you know, I even read you, Jason, but you and I aren't friends. So I would say that I monitor the media. I watch and see what is being discussed. But in this particular case, it's in the court, and it'll be up to the court to decide the veracity of the claims.
Okay, then. Let's do this. There's so much to unpack there, because there is a lot to unpack there. First of all, that's quite the moral abdication. It's really easy to say, if these allegations are true, which I would argue they are, if these allegations are true, it's reprehensible. it's any reasonable person should be able to condemn that if the allegations are true. I don't want to interfere with the court process. So, but what I've certainly seen publicly reported, it concerns me. It shocks and horrifies me. There's lots of different ways to say the bad thing that happened was a bad thing. That doesn't require anything more than a conscience and maybe a soul to get there, to recognize. Like, here's the thing. Athana Mantzalopoulos and Sandy Edmonton and others were targeted by these two podcasters in what the judge referred to in his ruling as a sandblasting campaign that was designed to sap their will to continue with the lawsuit. Daniel Smith certainly had no problem referencing, as you heard Jason Markusoff from the CBC speak there, referencing the content of what those two podcasters were saying inside of the legislature. And Mr. Markusoff's bang on. She did have, by proxy, have to apologize for those comments. So she was aware of what was happening. And certainly in her non-response response, well, Jason, we're not friends, but I read what you write. I monitor the media in all kinds of different ways. I'm not going to say that I definitely watched their or listened to their podcasts, and that's where I got my inspiration for that tasteless joke from. Inside of the legislature, I'm not going to say out loud that that's what I did, but I also can't say that that's not what I did. So I guess I'll just use some word salad to try to back my way out of this. But here's the other piece of that puzzle that is really fascinating, because Daniel Smith did not deny that she was following these two podcasters, and their audience was not that big. It was very clearly targeted. There were, at times, they spoke directly to the people that they were wanting to hear. There was no advertising for this program. So one can only imagine that it was only people who were super inside of the situation, who were paying any attention to these two people with their podcast. That's what one can only assume. And somehow it found its way all the way, this abstract little podcast that a couple hundred views per episode, that managed to find its way to the premier's office. It did. Wow. So much so that she was so engaged with it that she made a reference to content from that podcast inside of the legislature, and somebody had to apologize for it. I mean, I don't know what kind of time Dani has. I would like to tell myself that the premier of a province that's facing an existential crisis that she caused with a referendum question would be busy. Whether we're talking about the premier of the province who's mandated the destruction of the disintegration, of the healthcare system. I would like to think that she does not have all that much free time to watch one of the lesser known podcasts in the Alberta scene. It makes me wonder, with nothing more than wondering, why she would be so invested in watching a podcast that's dedicated to ruining the life and the will of a person who's actively suing the government. I can't imagine why somebody might be paying extra close attention to that. I don't know. I guess I just have to wonder for a while longer. But it's starting to look like things might be heating up on that front, because there's been some bonkers developments that have gone on. For those of you that tuned in on to Thursday's open mic, you would remember me talking about the avalanche of court documents that landed on the breakdown that I've been slowly trying to work my way through. And there's one in particular. This has been touched on by a few other places as well. Globe and Mail did a great story about it. I want to walk through the actual documents with you folks tonight, because it's nuts. So what we're going to talk about, These were obtained by going through paying the $25. I'd like all the documents on this case with this file number. And then the very nice people at the courts said, oh, brace yourself. And I have been getting a lot of emails. So this document in particular, it's one of the more recent ones, and it is filed. It is a questioning on an affidavit. So by way of a little bit of background, if you're going to be a witness in a thing, or you're going to be a participant in a legal thing, generally speaking, you have to provide a statement, a written statement. An affidavit tends to be the form that takes. So you write down, yes, at this time, at this place, I saw this thing. I do swear this. And that's what happened. I'm speaking to the information that I have knowledge of. That's what an affidavit normally is. And once you've signed that in say maybe a lawsuit, then the other side gets to go, oh, we've got some questions for you. We do. And then they ask you questions about what you've put in your affidavit. So this affidavit, and I'm going to apologize for the pronunciation, Mraiche Fajarsanu. I'm sorry, I got that wrong. I know I did. It's not spelled phonetically. I apologize. I'm not trying to do a bit with that. I am going to do some bits in just a minute here, though, because there's some bonkers stuff that came out in this affidavit. I'll be quick. I will keep it not terribly in depth so it doesn't get too dry. But here's the first one, because this is bonkers. Are you aware whether AHS has received through the RCMP or legal counsel any production orders with respect to records involving procurement or CSF, that's Chartered Surgical Facilities, contracts? Yes, I'm aware. What can you tell me about that? That we received the production order issued to AHS? Yes. So what's a production order? It's basically like a warrant, but not quite. It's when you know somebody has something that is relevant to an investigation. So the technical definition is a production order is a judicial authorization. So that means a judge has said, this is the thing, that compels a person, including an organization, to disclose documents and records to an authorized peace officer. So what that means is there has to be reason to believe that whoever has those documents actually has those documents. So a judge has to have been presented with reason to believe that these people have these documents that are relevant to this investigation. And when we're talking about the RCMP, we're talking about a criminal investigation in all likelihood. So what this little piece of this questioning means is that this guy, who is the Senior Vice President for Corporate and Clinical Support Services, is aware that the RCMP have said, you have some documents that we think are relevant to this criminal investigation that we're doing. Give them to us now. The judge says so. So that's not nothing. That's a pretty big development. But where it gets wild is the strategy that appears to be being deployed by the government lawyers. And I'm going to read you two sections because they're nuts. Remember what I said about an affidavit. An affidavit is, these are the things that I know. These are the things that I learned and that I know. I will swear on a bumper sticker that these are things that I know to be true. You have to swear an oath. It's all very serious. I've had to sign a few of these in the last little while. I'm going to read now from the first section. You are saying there, I have reviewed the records produced in the plaintiff's AOR, which stands for Affidavit of Records, and then you also say for supplemental AOR, meaning a supplemental affidavit of records, including those referenced below. Do you see where the affidavit says that, sir? Yes, yeah. That is not true, correct? I have reviewed it through our legal counsel. Question, you did not look at the records in Ms. Mensalopoulos' affidavit of records or her supplemental affidavit of records. That's what I heard you say earlier. Is that true that you did not look at them? I did not look, no. It is based on the legal counsel's review. So the Senior Vice President, Corporate and Clinical Support Services swore an affidavit saying that he had looked at the things when he had not looked at the things. because the lawyers told him, the lawyers for AHS, for government, apparently, according to his questioning, they said, oh no, it's in there, trust us. Which is not how an affidavit is supposed to work. And you would think one example of that would be pretty bad. That would show to a reasonable person, it would put them in a position where they could draw the interpretation that perhaps the lawyers are driving, for the government side, are driving at a very specific agenda. And they're bringing forward witnesses who aren't so much witnesses as people who will say, I will sign whatever you would like me to, sir. But we got to talk about this other one. In paragraph 21, you refer to the affidavit of Leanne Wagner, sworn on March 25th, 2025. Have you had a chance to read that affidavit? No. You don't have any knowledge of what is stated there in paragraph 21 because you haven't read that affidavit correct. I have knowledge of what is being included, referred to in the affidavit, based on the legal counsel assessment. Is what you were saying when you say that you don't know the facts in 21, you're relying on the lawyers knowing that, and you agreed to sign the affidavit. Is that what you mean? I mean that I relied on the legal counsel's assessment informing on what I signed. Do you understand that you took an oath and you swore to tell the truth when you signed this affidavit? Yes. Did you read in paragraph 21 where it says, I have personal knowledge of the following information except where I state that is based on information from another source, in which case I believe that information to be true. So the lawyers for Athana Metsalopoulos were able to figure out, based on this questioning, fairly quickly that this guy was not being that he had signed some things saying that he knew some things when he did not know the things, which is bonkers. It's absolutely bonkers that this person, I mean, there's two pieces to this that just blow my mind. The first one is that you have an individual who's that high ranking in that powerful an organization, and he'll just sign any old thing a lawyer puts in front of him when it involves one of the highest profile lawsuits in Alberta's history without reading it first. That blows my mind. That blows my mind that you would just say, I trust the lawyers. But so that person is that, but the fact that the lawyers are apparently, according to this questioning, I want to say, and I don't know if this is the right word, effectively manufacturing witnesses who haven't read all of the things that they're swearing that they have read. Like, that's such a bad look. I don't know if it's illegal. I feel like it's immoral. It certainly seems misleading. But wow, I'm so looking forward to reading the other like 4,000 pages because I've just been working my way backwards from the most recent stuff. And this is bonkers. But that's not the only development in the great big corrupt care scandal. Before we do that, though, it's important to highlight this was another thing that Naheed Nenshi with the NDP addressed at his press conference on June 17th.
The only kind of government who hides as much as this government has hidden on the corrupt care scandal is a government with something to hide. Simple as that. We should have had a public inquiry into this 2 years ago. The government has steadfastly refused to shed any light on this, and every single time there's a revelation, the Premier says she didn't know. She didn't know that the Minister of Justice is Sam Mraiche's cousin. She didn't know that her ministers were going to hockey games with Sam Mraiche. She didn't know that AHS told her not to sign the Turkish Tylenot deal. And she blames everything on AHS, and every time she does that, she tells on herself, because she doesn't know that as Premier, she runs AHS. And by the way, she did know enough to meet with Jitendra Prasad when she was running for the leadership, who was in charge of procurement at AHS. Why would you meet with someone so low down in the civil service when you're running for the leadership unless you're up to something? So absolutely, we still need a public inquiry on corrupt care. We need to clear the air on this, and just saying the RCMP is investigating and not telling us who or what they're investigating or what's been turned over, and relying on Justice Wine's report, where Justice Wine says on the first page of his report that he didn't have the mandate or the ability to actually make any judgments on whether the government had any wrongdoing. We can't do it anymore. Albertans deserve to know the truth. The Premier needs to come clean, and she won't. And because she won't, Albertans would be forgiven for thinking she's got something to hide.
And we're still not done with the crop care stuff, because the other piece that came out this week, this was revealed in a reporting done by the Globe and Mail, is that the RCMP have brought in Veteran Ontario prosecutor to take a look at all of the Alberta health procurement stuffs. So the caption, the RCMP announced an investigation last year after former Alberta Health Services Chief Executive Athana Mentzelopoulos was fired by the government. Premier Smith raised concerns about the health agency's procurement practice. The lawyer that they have brought in is he's a heavy hitter. He has all sorts of organized crime investigations. He has Hells Angels investigations. Like, this is not somebody who has just been brought in to phone it in. He's a big gun. And so the fact that he's being involved in the criminal investigation is noteworthy, shall we say. And now I promised you some more fun. I'm going to deliver. I've been looking forward to this. Every once in a while here at The Breakdown, we get to have an interaction with a government official. Usually it's a press secretary or a policy advisor. Every once in a while, it's a little bit higher up the ladder. And that brings us to this guy right here. Mr. Chugging Beer in the legislature, Dan D. Williams himself. This is so dumb. It's so dumb. This is the world we live in. It blows my mind. In order to talk about Dan first, though, we got to talk about this guy right here, the one in the middle there with his hands behind his back. That is longstanding supporter of the show, Cian Bexte. Cian is a problematic little figure in the world of new media. This is a picture pulled from a video that occurred after, at a private event, press conference. He was refused entry. He went in anyways. This is a private business. And the business owner was like, hey, could you just maybe leave? Because I don't want you here. And he was like, I don't think I'm going to do that. And the business owner, whose property this is in, was all like, okay, I hear you, but you're in private property and I need you to leave. And Mr. Bexte was all, I don't think I will. So as you can see, the police were called. The two men on either side are the police officers. And when they were like, dude, you got to go, it's private property, he stuck his hands behind his back and walked out of the store. And there were many pictures that were taken that day and there were many people who interpreted his performance as trying to suggest that he had been arrested and that he had handcuffs put on, as opposed to simply being walked off of private property that he had no business or approval to be on. So, there's that. That's Mr. one of many examples to just sort of highlight the type of performative individual that Mr. Bexte is. Well, on June 19th, Mr. Bexte put up this little screed on the Twitter machine. Spent the day in Alberta's mountains. Had tea overlooking a sublime view of the glaciers, the Bow Valley and Lake Louise. It was great after getting some altitude and above the lake, which was absolutely packed, all caps, with foreigners. Parking was impossible, so even the access roads were lined with wandering non-citizens abusing Mark Carney's Canada Strong Pass. It should be called India's All Access Pass. Local Albertans can't use their own damn park, let alone other Canadians. Parking for Canadians was $40. $40. It was free for the bus loads of non-Canadians. To make matters worse, the abuse of the natural environment was unreal. Garbage in the trees, people ripping tree branches down to use as walking sticks, people screaming into a live stream on a quiet forest trail to their family back home. America charges foreigners to go to Yellowstone and Yosemite. I can see why. Total disrespect for the most beautiful place on earth and for the taxpayers that pay to keep it that way. Oh, he's big angry. big angry Mr. Baxty was. And normally we don't pay that much attention to Mr. Baxty. We don't pay attention to his racist screeds. And some people might look at that rant that he put up on the Twitter machine and go, "Oh my, that's horrifying." But it's not particularly off brand. Does Mr. Baxty have any sort of history? Oh, hey, Ricochet. I ruined the bit. Oh, hey, Ricochet. Because in November of 2018, Ricochet Media did a investigation where they found, I'll read the headline here, Rebel media reporter, by the way, Cian Baxty used to work for the Rebel, worked for white supremacist web store. Cian Baxty identified as one of the operators of Fire Force Ventures. So that's a thing that Mr. Baxty has in his history. I think I also mentioned earlier on previous episodes, this fine upstanding gentleman here with the white supremacist web store in his background and who likes to post super racist rants about park passes and having to pay for private parking as opposed to park parking. He was getting a lot of money from the provincial government. He was getting in on the same deal that the Western Standard had going, where they were putting up banner ads and raking in tens of thousands of dollars. You can go back and find our episode that we did about that if you're so inclined. But that's, again, there are gross corners of the internet where people do and say gross things. Normally that would not merit the attention of the breakdown, but we do not live in normal times, folks. And so that brings us to the next little tidbit, because Dan Williams, and you have to realize that in order for Dan to have chosen to do what he did here, he would have to have Cian Baxty showing up on his timeline. So that's not nothing. The breakdown did, Dan agreed. So what Dan had to say was, Keenan, I love that he spelled his name wrong. Keen gets his little moment where a minister of the crown retweets him and he spells his name wrong. Keenan is right. We have incomparable treasure in the Canadian Rockies. The purpose of the park is for Canadians to visit! If we citizens don't have meaningful access, then the park is failing Canadians. I grew up in Banff and Jasper every weekend, eventually learning to ski and climb on our most majestic peaks. I want my son to know the same beauty. Unfortunately, if this keeps up, access to the Rockies will be sold to the highest international bidder rather than conserved for our children. Now, let's be clear before we go on any further there. If anybody is selling off the Rockies and approving massive projects in the Rockies, we're not talking about the national parks. You can't sell those because they're national parks. But if anybody's selling off and allowing for development of private investors in the Rockies, it's the UCP Fortress Mountain COF. We have a FOIP pending on that one as well. So there's that. But that in and of itself, the fact that the Minister of the Crown is now retweeting Cian Baxty's racist screed, now we've got ourselves a party. This is where the breakdown eats. And so we put this little tweet up. We're an angry Caillou. We call him Angry Caillou because he looks at least to me, he looks like a very angry version of Caillou. We're an angry Caillou, unsurprisingly, tweets out a racist dog whistle. And Alberta's Minister of Municipal Affairs retweets him saying, Keenan, we kept the spelling, is right. A minister of the crown not only amplifying anti-tourism and racist rhetoric, agreeing with it. Because that's what happened. The opening statement of Dan Williams' retweet of Keenan's screed was, Keenan is right. And in most normal times, again, we do not live in normal times. In most normal times, that would have and should have been the end of the exchange. Somebody should have taken Dan's phone away from him. That would presumably be a press secretary's job. The press secretary, however, did not take the phone away, because Dan responded with retweeting the breakdown. Nothing wrong or racist about saying our national parks should be our four nationals first. 72 to 80% of foreign visitors to Banff are American. This is why nobody believes the left's disingenuous elbows up theater. As soon as it's invoked to actually defend Canadian interests against bad policy, free park entrance for Americans, while Canadians are priced out of hotels and pushed out of campsites, you fall back on the all too tired accusations of racism. And then includes a hyperlink. But let's unpack that for a quick sec. So all of a sudden, despite the fact that Bexty called it the All Access Indian or whatever it was, pass, and despite the fact that he made it clear that he wasn't talking about the white kind of people. He had a very particular demographic that he was targeting his screed to. Now we have Dan Williams in here being like, whoa, it's all about the Americans, man. I didn't read the tweet. I just retweeted it because it sounded angry, and I like rage farming. So that's what happened there. It is fundamentally. Let's make sure that I get Mr. Bexty's tweet right. It is, to be clear, fundamentally racist to say parking was impossible, so even the access roads were lined with wandering non-citizens abusing Mark Carney's Canada Strong Pass. It should be called India's All Access Pass. So it's pretty targeted, and it's not targeted to Americans, Dan. Sorry, big guy. And you know, if he had read even part of it and then just been like, yeah, people should have access to the parks, should be Canadians first, it would be very easy to, at that point, say, whoops, I didn't read it all. I just really like Keenan. I like what Keenan says. Big fan of Juno and the counter signal. So I just retweeted Keenan. I thought it was my burner account. There's a bajillion different excuses that Dan Williams could have used, but he chose to double down. He chose to go all in. And he brought a link. Oh, he brought a link to prove his point. He did. And what did that link say? Let's take a quick look at where that CTV link, that Calgary Herald link went. Well, it leads to a story that says there are challenges. Visitors flock to Banff National Park in record numbers, adding to strain. Officials say they're trying to mitigate the human impacts, but conservationists fear not enough is being done. Oh, so there are some traffic problems in Banff. Okay, that's reasonable. I'm curious though, It was written by Bill Kaufman. I wonder when he published it. I wonder if that's relevant. I wonder if that's germane to the conversation at hand. Since we're talking about Mark Carney's All Access Indian All Access Pass, since we're talking about that, I wonder when it was published. Oh, it appears that it was published on May 23rd, 2024. Just for fun, when was the Canada Strong Pass introduced? Oh, right, June 18th, 2025. Mark Carney announced it via his Twitter account. I'm pretty sure 2025 comes after 2024. So if you want to say the problem is Mark Carney's All Access Pass, the Canada Strong Pass, it should have come before the thing that you're using as an example of how it's just so dumb. The tourism piece has been increasing. There's no question about that. But you can't attribute it wholly to the Canada Strong Pass, especially when you're saying as a minister, oh yeah, this is Keenan's right. Keenan is right. And you'd think that would be where the dumb stops. But it's not. Because it turns out that at the beginning of this year, This would be after a couple of iterations of the Canada Strong Pass, by the way. Tourism Alberta released this media statement. Alberta tourism sector smashes previous record with $15.2 billion in visitor spend in 2025. Alberta has once again outperformed its previous revenue record, reaching $15.2 billion in visitor spend in 2025. In a fiercely competitive global market, Alberta's visitor economy grew by more than 6%. Outperforming the national average of approximately 4%. Central Alberta's economic diversification. Tourism is the province's fourth largest driver of international trade and employs 10% of Albertans. Despite global uncertainty, Alberta was the only major province to see growth in overseas arrivals in 2025, posting 3% growth, while Canada saw a negative 2% growth. Alberta was also one of the only major provinces in Canada to see growth from U.S. travelers in 2025, posting almost 5% growth compared to negative 6% nationwide. And then we've got a quote here. Let's read the quote. Let's do it together. Nearly 2 years after the launch of Alberta's higher ground tourism sector strategy, which was a tourism strategy designed to attract more international visitors, we are continuing to see significant growth. Investing in tourism boosts our economy by supporting thousands of jobs, attracting new investment, and creating opportunities for communities across the province. We will continue to build on this momentum and ensure Alberta remains the best place to live, work, and play, said Andrew Boychenko, Minister of Tourism and Sport. And at this point, you have to know the only way that this could possibly get any dumber would be if I was about to tell you that one of the few people that positively engaged with Dan Williams' anti-tourism, racist signal boosting of Keenan was none other than Andrew Boychenko, Minister of Tourism. So the Minister of Tourism, you can see it up at the top there, Andrew Boychenko reposted. The Minister of Tourism said we should have less tourism in effect by backing up his boy Dani and supporting the signal boosting of Angry Caillou. It's just so. I wish you could make this stuff. This is why I was having a conversation with somebody earlier in the week, and they were like, "Can you believe it?" I'm like, at this point, man, somebody tells me something, and I do my very best. Certainly, before we bring it on the show, we verify it to the best of our abilities and make sure that it's real. But my immediate reaction to most things these days is, sure, why not? Why not? Why wouldn't that be a thing? Why wouldn't the Minister of Tourism and Sport in Alberta, only a few months after singing the praises of international tourism, signal boost a tweet from Dan Williams talking about how tourism is bad for Alberta and a bunch of racist stuff? Sure. Why not? Why not? Because it happened. I really, it fascinates me that these press secretaries, policy advisors, and the occasional minister decide from time to time that they're going to engage in a bad faith attempt to take a run at the breakdown. Because if it's in bad faith, you will always lose. And then I get to do half hour of content about how dumb you are making yourself look on social media. So thanks for that, I guess. And that is, it's so dumb. It's so dumb. That's the end of our show for tonight. I got a couple things that I want to plug real quick, and I have an announcement. Big announcement. I'm very excited for it. We'll do the plug, and then we'll do the big announcement. So we'll do the keeping the lights on plugs. First of all, we have a store. It has no separatist stuff. It just has stuff for us. We're going to be adding that new piece of item here. Hopefully I get that done this week. But it's got the hoodies, the t-shirts, the ball caps, the tank tops, all of the things. You can get all of your Breakdown merch at www.thebreakdownabmerch.ca. The reason why I'm plugging that is because if you get your merch, then you can wear it to our live show. one of these days, I'm going to point to the right side of the screen at the right time, and it will be less humiliating for me. Our live show in Edmonton, July 25th. It's going to be a blast. We have some amazing guests we've already announced. We've got Dr. Patrick Lennox, who's the international intelligence expert who hunted pirates. We have Dr. Jared Wesley, the political scientist and researcher who always has such wonderful insights. He's funny. He's going to make me look like a fool. I have no illusions about that. I'm looking forward to it. We have Jody Callahoo Stonehouse, who I'm so excited and so grateful that she said yes. And I said it last week. I'm going to say it again because I think it's relevant. I did, in good faith, send out an invitation to the UCP caucus if they had anybody that wanted to come and have a conversation at the Breakdowns live show in Edmonton. I would be more than happy to have them. And in a good faith conversation, I can be very, very respectful. I know sometimes it seems maybe not, but it can be. I do have that gear, just not when I'm confronted with open racism and stupidity. But I'd like to believe that they have a couple of the little bit of bench strength that is not those things. As of yet, we did not get any replies from the UCP caucus. So I extend this invitation again. And in fact, I hear the Premier of Alberta, she consumes a wide variety of media, particularly of the podcast variety. So Dani, you can come. You can come. You can come. I'll be nice. We'll talk about one thing only, but if you want to come, you can. In the meantime and in between time, though, I am so excited to announce our next guest who's going to be joining us in Edmonton. It's going to be a short commute for her. The theme of the evening will be the separatism piece, the separatism referendum, the rhetoric, all of those things. But it also is going to have to do with the mechanisms by which we got there. And I can imagine no better person to speak to what's the technical term I'm looking for here? Fuckery. That'll work. That occurred in the Forever Canadian referendum question committee than a member of that committee, which is why I am so excited that I get to share tonight that our fourth guest for Edmonton will be none other Deputy Leader of the NDP, Rakhi Pancholi. This lineup is insane. It is insane. This lineup. I'm so grateful for it. Rakhi has generously agreed to come out and we're going to have a conversation about what it was like to be in that room when the bugman from Men in Black released his press release before the debate had even finished and the vote had even been cast. It's going to be, I am so excited for this show. So if you haven't gotten your tickets yet, go to thebreakdownABlive.ca and get your tickets now. I overbooked, so we have lots of room. But you should get your tickets anyways. It's going to be fun. Lots of people are going to come out. It's going to be an absolute blast. I'm so excited to have this whole lineup is so good. There's no I love this whole thing that I get to do. I love this so much. And I'm so grateful that everybody shows up in the way that they do. It is just all kinds of silly fun for me. And if you want to support the silly fun that we try to have here at the Breakdown and the occasional journalism that we do here at the Breakdown, took a few folks by surprise this week. You can help support us in that endeavor by signing up to be one of our Patreon supporters at www.patreon.com/thebreakdownab. And you can sign up for your monthly amount of choice. If you're not big into the monthly commitments, then you can also just send an e-transfer to info@thebreakdownab.ca. All of it goes to help support the show, the FOIPs, the court document requests, all of that good stuff. So there you go. There's those things that you can do there. I want to say a big thank you to the chat. I saw that it was very active tonight. I'm looking forward to reading it all. I'm really looking forward to this Thursday. Still trying to get down the, you know what? I'm going to hold. I'm going to try to get down the guest that had to cancel for the interview. So this Thursday is just going to be another open mic, but we're going to do a theme. Oh, we're getting better. Maybe. I'm going to make sure my phone's charged. We're going to be talking about healthcare for our open mic. That's our theme for the open mic. The theme will be healthcare. And in particular, the announcements around the dual practice announcements that were made to expand the privatization and profitization of Alberta healthcare. Because, boy, there's a lot to unpack there. But I want to hear your thoughts. So, Thursday, 7 o'clock. I will be here this Thursday on 7 o'clock. It will not get bumped to Friday. I have set a reminder. And the trailer renter's almost done. So, there's that. Thank you all so much for tuning in tonight. And don't you worry, I didn't forget.
How's your BS detector evolved over time?
I tend to be pretty trusting.
It seemed like she was so much more comfortable with Jason back then in those early days before she got all corrupty. She seemed to be okay answering questions from Mr. Markusoff. And then her whole premiership happened. Strangest thing. Thank you all so much for tuning in tonight. If you're on the YouTubes, like, subscribe, the little bell thing. If you're on the Facebooks, because we are back on the Facebooks finally, thank God. Share it with your aunts, your uncles, your friends. Raise some blood pressure. Or just maybe get some information out there. That's fun too. If you're listening to the podcast version, then that's where you can do the reviews and the stars things. Apparently that does help. The Breakdown was recently rated as the 7th most influential political podcast social media platform in Alberta Politics. So means nothing to me. But it's fun to make jokes about. It helps you get in front of more people. Anyways, so big thank you to everybody for tuning in tonight. As always, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Buy your shirts. Buy your ticket. Damn it. Tickets. Keep the conversation going.